Hello again to all of you fucking people. This is episode 21 of Dead Money. I got some hand histories for you today, and once again they will space across 3 sessions. Hopefully I can get all of them into this one episode before my attention span runs out. I don't have ADD or ADHD or any of those attention issue things, but I am weird, so you never know. I might just stop caring about this at any moment. Anyway, so as expected, I started seeing Squeaky again in the mornings. I was lucky enough to fade his table back-to-back days, but could not complete the trifecta. But holy shit, I finally caught him on a day where he doesn't have 40,000 in front of him. I heard him making multiple comments about how bad he's been running both that day and most recently. And all I could think was, hooray! I ended up not having to play with him that long because he went to 5-10 once it opened to try and get even or get even worse, but we did have one hand. The straddle was on. I raised to 30 under the gun with pocket tens. He 3-bets to 100. Okay, I call. And the flop was something like Queen 8-6, 2 diamonds. I didn't write everything down as diligently as I usually do. I assumed I would just remember everything, which was pretty stupid considering I legitimately have some mild brain damage from a concussion I got a few years ago when my black belt Muay Thai training partner beat the shit out of me whilst sparring. I was only a green belt. So I'm just a lot more forgetful over things that aren't life and death. You know, like I don't forget which side of the road to drive on. Anyway, I do know I had a diamond. And he quickly bet 125. I called. And the turn, I think, had paired the bottom card, whatever it was. We both checked. And the river was an ace. Lovely. I check. He thinks a little, and he checks. I show, and he rolls over the ace-jack offsuit. So, wow, Squeaky not going for any value there. His kicker was nullified with the board pairing and the queen out there, but I don't know. That may have been a sign of like some respectful fear of him not wanting to possibly have to see a river check raise, not knowing what it means, because he sure remembers what happened a few months ago when I turned pocket aces into a bluff and made him fold the second nut flush. I had the blocker, of course. Or he could have just been fearing monsters under the bed, too, as well, since he said he was having a bad day. That pretty much happens to all of us. Once we start losing for a while, we just start thinking it's going to happen every time. But I'll give him credit for one thing. And Squeaky is kind of growing on me again a little. He was apparently getting his ass kicked, but he was every bit as loud and annoying and trying to be funny as he always is, so it's not like he's only like that when he's winning. But then he asked me if I remembered when he slow-rolled me with the pocket tens, and because shortly after I bluffed him that game a few months ago, he rivered a set of tens, and I made a stupid light call on him, and he said, "Good call, I only have a set of tens." I said, "Of course I remember, how could I forget?" And then I added, when I had the pocket tens just now against you, I thought this was going to be my chance to get you back for that. And he laughed. Then he said, "I like you." And we shook hands. And then he left for 5-10. But he had also just taken a break before that little exchange and handshake. So I'm guessing he just tugged it in the bathroom, because why else would he decide to shake my hand? But alright, so then a lot of people left. A new lineup filled up the game. And one of the regs who just joined, he was promptly cold-decked for lots of money with kings against aces. Then a little while after that, he raises to 15. He usually goes to 20. I made it 50 from the cutoff with ace-deuce of spades. He calls. Flop is queen 6-6 rainbow. And I have the backdoor flush draw. And he and I have played a lot at this point. We've traded blows more than just a few times over the last 4.5 years, and I decided I was going to try and rep a trap at some point, so I just checked back. The turn was a jack, and he check called 60. The river was a 9, and he checks again, and I don't know, I wasn't feeling so good about this anymore. And I suppose I should have just aborted the mission, but I guess since I already decided I was going to do this, and I know he's going to be pretty marginal a lot, I went for it anyway. I don't really have any good blockers. I overbet 370, and he snap calls with the Queen 10 offsuits. Okay. Just a typical mega spew pre-flop, calling the 3-bet out of position against me and getting this run out where he decided he's not folding. He blocks the King 10 straight. He knows I'll use big sizes for bluffs, so if I have him, he's just paying me. So I really need to keep an eye open for two things. One, that's getting back into when, it seems like almost every big bluff I fire that goes down is when I start getting this not so comfortable feeling. I mean, some of those bluffs work. It's not like they all fail. But when I have a really good feeling about firing a really big bluff, those very rarely get caught. But I guess, it gets hard sometimes to pull out of it once you've sort of made up your mind that you think this is what you want to do. And the other thing I need to keep an eye open for is just bet really big for value against guys like him and other regs, since some of them are aware that I'm willing to use these kinds of sizes for bluffs. But most importantly, do that, when they're a little rattled like he was. So a little while later, I raise with pocket threes. The button calls. It's this Asian guy who I'd seen in the last couple of days, and he's not a terrible player, but he's going to be fishy sooner or later. And then the flop was ace-6-3, and this is what you dream of after you've been caught. I bet the flop. I think I bet 30. He called. Turn was a 5, and it was another heart. I bet 165 into 100. He called fast. The river missed the flush, and it paired the 6. So if he has either an ace, or especially a 6, he ain't going anywhere. Still didn't want to jam, though. Just psychologically, I was a little worried that that's going to just make it look like I'm trying to rep a bluff again when this time I have it. So this time I just bet really big again. I bet 750 into 430, I guess, and that's, kind of telling the same story, but it's not a jam. And I don't know. I just thought I might have a better chance of getting called. But he didn't think especially long, and he folded. So he could have had an ace, but I'm just telling myself that 5-4 or 5-7 or maybe even 5 deuce are his likeliest hands. Then comes a hand, blind versus blind. First he asked me if I wanted to chop, which I never do. So he limps, and look what I have, ace-king of clubs. I make it 20, and now he limp raises to 95, and he's deep as well. Now this guy was playing, he was just an Asian guy, looked about younger than me, which means he could have been older than me, but, he was playing fairly reasonably. I mean, it didn't seem like he was especially one way or the other. Limp raising in this situation is something you'll see from advanced thinking players. And, I fucked up here because I should just fucking 4-bet. And I get why I didn't. It's because I feel that I'm going to play just really well post-flop in position. And I really don't want to risk having to play for the stack in case he 5-bets. But I still get a little too comfortable sometimes, or not comfortable, just too habituated with just flatting a lot of hands in position, because I was pretty sure that this was just bullshit. I mean, he didn't see the hand when I had bluffed off with the ace-deuce. He was away from the table. But even so, if he had a real hand, I think he's just going to open raise himself. So I don't really need to let him risk hitting something stupid by just calling. There's still merit for just calling. because I probably have a better chance of fucking him than he can fuck me, but just think 4-betting is better. And I for sure would have if I had a hand like, ace 7 or king 9 or just some hand that isn't very good, and therefore I won't care if it gets 5-bet. But, I mean, whatever. I guess this all could have been worse since I made a royal flush. The flop was jack 8 deuce, 2 spades and a club. The jack was the club. He checked and I checked. Turn was the 10 of clubs. We both checked again, and the river was the queen of clubs, and he checks a third time, and then I had to think for a little while of how much I can bet and get called. I think I did 90 or 95. He gave it some thought and called, and when he called, I just said, I win. I was like, I win. I have a royal. Then, of course, I said to him, I wish I jammed pre-flop. He said he would not have called that, and so, all in all, I mean, I may have won the most money by doing this, but I just don't like the way I played this hand. And it even feels like I should have bet at some point before the river. Whatever. So not much longer after that, that guy left. The guy I had the royal against. And then the tides really turned when this Indian whale sat down. Now, I don't want to risk being called a racist for some reason of some kind by assigning him an Indian name that would suit him, because I still don't know his name. So let's just call him Brandon. I'd seen Brandon a few days earlier, and Brandon did not mind bluffing off everything ASAP. He wasn't in the game for more than a few minutes, and he was already gone. So he sits down with 1,500, but this time he promptly started to win. So first hand I play with Brandon in the game, I have ace-king off under the gun against his big blind. I raised probably to 20 again, and the small blind called. He was a fish too. This game was great pretty much all day, and Brandon called in the big blind. And as the flop was coming, Brandon said if he wins this hand, he should get a trophy. And the flop missed me completely. It was jack 9-6, 2 spades. We all check. Turn was another jack, and the small blind checked again. I think Brandon bet like 20 and into 60, I guess. I raised to 50 for value, except then the small blind calls. Brandon folds, of course. The river is an 8, and I think it was a third diamond. So, yeah, backdoor flush hits, and the queen 10 straight also hit. Then the small blind bets 125. I fold, and he shows the queen 10. Cool. Next hand of interest, someone raised to 15, and Brandon just dumps in this 3-bet of 45, and I cold called with pocket nines, and cold calling is something I almost never do before the flop. And I should have just called 4-bet him and called it off if he jammed, or 6-bet jammed if he had 5-bet, because I immediately thought that this is just bullshit. But instead, I just call. We go 3 ways. The flop is ace 10-7, 2 clubs, and the small blind. Another new big fish to the game. This elderly white guy. He donks for 200, over betting the flop, and he just wins right there. Now, by this time, Brandon had made his presence felt to this elder statesman, since he was extremely loud the whole time he was there. And then this old guy, who was still new to the game, everyone folded to him. He raised to 50. Okay. Folds to me, and I got queens on the button, and I just called. I mean, he was deep, and I'm going to puke if he 4-bets me, so that's why I just called, even though 3-betting is definitely not a bad idea. But the flop came king jack 4, and then he pots it. Okay, now I fold, and he shows a set of 4s. So that's what he tanked it with before the flop. Didn't have to call a 3-bet. Promptly hit his set, and I was able to get away from it quickly since it was king high. So ran good as far as that goes. Ran bad as far as him hitting the set, but ran good with everything else. Didn't put in more than I had to pre-flop and didn't have to put anything in post-flop. But after he showed, he said, he's like, just so you know, I wasn't lying. It's like he felt guilty if there was any wondering in the back of my mind if whether or not he was bluffing. So he was just trying to comfort me, I guess. I said, okay, you weren't lying. I can see that. Next hand, I straddled, and I had pocket nines again. This old man limps in the small blind. Brandon makes it 50, and this time I think calling is definitely much more likely what I should be doing. We go three ways. The flop comes ace, king, 7, 2 diamonds. Small blind overbet donks again, going 200. I think Brandon raised, and I don't know. They got it in, and Brandon doubled him, and the old man had ace, deuce. Okay. And then I forget what happened, but someone stacked the old guy. I mean, he had just doubled up, but then bang, bang, he was broke, and he left the table, but he said he was coming back. And when he did, he got into another hand with Brandon, who was continuing to yap loudly and kind of taunt him a little bit until the old guy yelled at him. He's like, can you shut the fuck up? You're giving me a headache. And then Brandon, who was still winning at this point, started saying, wait, do we need the floor man for this? Because he just said a very bad word, and I don't think I should have to take this. And he obviously wasn't serious. Just continuing to try and stew the old man some more. Brandon was just having a lot of fun because he was winning. And I was engaging him as well. Something you always want to do, if you can. When you have loquacious whales, if you can feed into it some and just give him more to feel good about, then why not? Brandon and I played a couple hands blind versus blind. I think he won them both. He was like, I'm 2-0 against you. I said, yes, you are. Then we had another blind versus blind situation that I won, making it 2-1, since that's all that matters. Not the amount of money you win, just the number of hands. So then we get into our fourth blind versus blind battle, where he limps the small blind. I check 10-9 off. And the flop is king, queen, 4, 2 spades. And he bet 30, just let out for 3 times the pot. My gut shot isn't to the nut straight, but I very much doubt that he was going to limp ace-10, so I really don't have to call. But all right, let's just fool around some more. I mean, there's got to be some ways I can find a way to deal with this without having a disaster. The turn didn't change anything. Now suddenly only bets 25. Thought for a little bit again. Thought about raising, but I called again. Just thinking I can probably bluff a fair number of rivers. But the river was a 9, so I have a third pair, and now he blasts 275 into 120. I mean, what a bizarre this spot was. I mean, normally I don't really contemplate much here. I just fold, but he was really loud again, right next to my ear. And he's telling me, he's like, just fold, man. He's like, I don't want your money. He's like, you can go have a nice dinner and instead of calling the 275. And he had actually done this nonsense already, because a little earlier, he was playing another pot with one of the fish who'd bet into him and on the river, and Brandon jammed a lot. And as the guy was thinking, Brandon was doing the whole spiel again. He's telling him, I have 2 pair. He's like, I don't want your money, blah, blah, blah. Then the guy called him, and Brandon had nothing. Now, I don't know if Brandon cares about any of that and is looking to balance the table talk, or if it's all just random. I felt like I was talking myself into it, and I guess I just felt like he deserved it. So I called, and he just had Jack 10 off for the Nutter Butters. Pretty sick, because my spade was the 10, so not only did he need one of my 9s to make his straight, it had to be a 2-outer to give him the stone nuts. So one of the 2 rivers showed up to even create this possibility. Oh well. So Brandon was limping in a lot, and then he limps again. And now I was starting to really up the sizing pre-flop because he was calling everything. And this is something I can't believe how little I see other regs and pros do when they do occasionally get the chance. They don't adjust their raise size to get way more value when they're in these situations. The guy is a whale, and he is more than willing to play for lots of money pre-flop with garbage. So you don't need to stick with your standard 3 or 4x raise. And if you're aware of that, but you still aren't doing it because you just don't want the pot to be bigger than what you're used to, then that's a leak. You finally have the cash cow. Everyone is always bemoaning Vegas and how bad the games are. And then you get into a spot like this and you just sit there and keep raising to 15. What the fuck are you doing? So I make it 35, and who knows how much bigger I can get away with, but I got King Jack of Hearts. He calls and we're heads up, and the flop was Ace Queen Deuce, 2 clubs, no hearts. He check calls 50, and felt like this is a hand I'm going to be firing some bluffs at because Brandon didn't seem, at least at this juncture, to mind laying down his hand post-flop if you were bringing some heat on him. But then the turn was the 10 of hearts, so now I've got the nut straight. He checks, and as I'm thinking, he's like, be careful. He's like whispering in my ear. He's like, you can just bet 200 to see where I'm at. So I bet 205, and he thinks for a little while, and then he turns over an ace, so God, fuck me. I mean, this has to mean he's folding, but he doesn't fold right away. And I'm just praying, like, is he trying to start some leveling war with me when he's calling, the hand's not over yet, and one of his cards is exposed? But no, he doesn't do that. He just folds. Ugh. And I guess it was about this time I started realizing even more that, he's not as willing to pay people off by calling as he is just bluffing into them. At least not now. But, God, that's sickening. To make that hand and get nothing from him. If I bet 150 or something, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe he would have folded to that too, but I'm guessing he wouldn't have. But whatever. Doesn't mean my size was stupid. I mean, because he probably will have a heavy part of his range be either calls or folds based on whatever meaningful size I pick. But either way, it failed miserably this time. So occasionally some other straddles were being put on, but he was doing it every chance he got, and I was doing it too for a while because, one, the game was really soft with enough limping that I didn't think I'd get really punished for this, so I wanted to have position on him with my straddle when it's his big blind as often as I could. And two, I thought this might help me get called by him a little more often in some spots because he sees that I'm straddling. But okay, on we go. And then a dealer sat down who was also a fan of the show, and he started talking about it a little bit, and then Brandon asked, he's like, what's your podcast about? And I said, people like you. And everyone started laughing, but then the dealer said, he means that in the best way. It's a compliment. I said, absolutely. Because yes, the last thing I want a whale to think is that I'm making fun of him at the table while he's there. But it was funny because as the game went on, he occasionally made some comments that seemed a little suggestive that he'd rather not be made fun of on a podcast because he could tell that's where I was going because I told him after. I mean, I do a lot of insult comedy on here, just making fun of all the constant idiotic things people say and do when they're playing. And he was in agreement about that. But then he also said, he's like, I don't care if you talk about me in your podcast, which to me sounded like, I do care if you talk about me in your podcast, because I've been thinking more about this lately. If you don't care about something, like truly not care, then why would you feel the need to mention you don't care, assuming that you weren't asked? Like, for instance, I've never asked my brother what his favorite color pillowcase is. And it's because I don't care what his favorite color pillowcase is. Never even thought about asking him that. So how many times has someone asked you something where they said they didn't care what the answer would be. Seems like something that tends to happen when men and women are asking each other who have they been fucking and then adding that they don't care what the answer is at the end. Well, if you don't care, then why is that question even crossing your mind, no less being pronounced? And look, I don't want to pick on him. All right, well, yeah, I kind of do. But I just thought it was funny that he seemed mildly displeased about the prospect of having fun poked at him on a podcast about poker, and then trying to feign the image that he doesn't care by volunteering the information himself that he doesn't care. And then soon after that, he was showing me some stock account app or something that was on his phone, and he was like, "Oh, I lost 25 grand today." But that wasn't really why he was showing me the app. He was showing me the app because, oh, what do you know? It just so happened to also say in the top left that the balance of that stock or whatever he's showing me was over $777,000. That's one of the things about these whales who play, especially the ones at 2-5. They really want you to believe they don't care if they lose, but they do care. They may not care about the actual monetary loss they take because they can afford it and they have it all budgeted and blah, 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 but no, fuck that. They don't enjoy losing. They don't want it to happen. They'll just live with it if it does, and they're expecting it to happen. But when people start babbling on about how much they don't care, they're just telling you the opposite. Because if they didn't care, they just wouldn't say anything. But all right, that'll do for the lectures. So now I've got King Jack of Hearts again. And I think the action went about the same way. He limped. I think maybe I made it 40 this time. I don't know. He calls. And the flop came King 8-6, 2 clubs and a heart. And he checks. And he's always peeling super wide on flops. But I decided to check back anyway. Number one, I didn't want to be check raised, even though I would never fold to it. Number two, I thought that might get him to start going nuts, since he's been showing me recently that he's willing to fold and is always willing to bluff. So now the turn is pretty coordinating. It's a 7, although it's another heart as well. He checks again. I'm like, all right, I bet 60, and now he makes it 200. Okay, well, nothing to do, so I call. And the river is the ace of hearts. So I have the nuts again. This time it's a flush. And he makes this really small block bet of $100. And I don't want to risk going too big again, but I got to put some mustard on it. So I make it 475, which seems big because I'm almost 5xing his bet, but it's also only raising about 55% of the pot, so it's not like huge. Then he turns over his hand as he's thinking, and he's got 8-6 offsuit with the 8 of hearts. So he flopped 2 pair with this, checked twice. He was clearly going to check raise the flop, but didn't get to do so until the turn. And he gets this river, and he's talking and he's thinking. First he said, he's like, "You check the flop?" He's like, "Yeah, you must have a king." And I'm just like, what? I was like, what the fuck? How does he know that? But then he says, "Oh, I guess you could have gone runner, heart. But I really, really don't believe that. I don't think you did that." Even though the way I played the hand, that, it's entirely possible. But for some reason, he was announcing he didn't believe it. And he's like, "Oh, I guess you can have ace-king." He's like, "No, you can't have that." So this all looks and sounds like someone who's getting ready to call. He goes on and on some more. And he folds again. God almighty. I mean, King Jack of Hearts specifically makes the nuts twice against a huge whale. And the combined action upon making the nuts each time was one bet of $100. So now there's a couple limps, and the old guy who loved opening to 50 with no one in when he had pocket fours now for some reason only makes it 25. There's one call, and Brandon just drops in $70 to 3-bet. I got king queen off as the button, and I don't know what happened where I suddenly just decided to have a nitty moment. It was easily the nittiest moment I had all day, maybe the only nitty moment I had in this whole session. I mean, I'm not going to be calling here, and even though it's not an amazing spot, I mean, I can just cold 4-bet this to like 200 or something and then just deal with whatever happens. But this time I just folded. It goes 2 or 3 ways, and of course the flop was queen 9-4 rainbow. I'm pretty sure this hand ended on the flop. I don't remember who won. And look, it's not as if like this was a lock for me to like double up or something, but obviously when you make this fold the one time you do it and then you get this flop after the kind of day you've already had, you're going to be quite annoyed. So now I got pocket sevens in the big blind, 2 guys limp. Brendan makes it 20 in the small blind. I 3-bet to 80, and everyone folds, including him. Okay. I mean, it's not that, pocket sevens is a royal flush, but you just kind of figure you're not going to get a fold in that spot, and then you do once again. Then old man pocket fours, he raises to 50 again. Brandon calls, and I have another king-queen offsuit on the button. And maybe I should have 3-bet this too, but I called. Just play post-flop in position. I mean, it just seemed to be doing this a little bit too much today. I don't know. I mean, every individual time I did it, I think it was totally like not something you have to question. But at the same time, it's like you'd think at some point I would have like thrown something in here, whether it was a 3-bet or a cold 4-bet, one or the other. Instead, I was just calling all day. So we go to the flop. Still got the high stack to pot ratio on that. I like. Flop comes ace, queen, 8, 2 hearts. I have the king of hearts. And the original raiser leads for 525. So just your standard 3.5x c-bet into 2 players. I don't remember what exactly happened or when, but at some point, Brandon started losing his money back. Not slowly, but surely. Just surely. Then he opens to 20. There's one call. And I was out. And then the button, who wasn't that deep at any point in the day, he 3-bet huge to 110. And Brandon calls. And Brandon was trolling this same guy pretty hard a while ago when it was 4 p.m. Because Brandon said, oh, it's the guy who plays one hand every 3.5 hours. And I said to Brandon, all right, so set your watch for 7:30. That's when he should be out there again. Well, it wasn't quite 7:30 yet, but Brandon is now calling this monster-sized 3-bet. The flop comes 10-7-7 rainbow, and I think Brandon just check called. The turn was a 9. Then Brandon lead jams. He had Jack 10 off, got called by pocket aces, and he lost. So I couldn't get him to call me either time for anything when I had the nuts twice and was straddling and giving action. But the guy he yelled about playing one hand every 3.5 hours gets all the action with aces when he's not that deep and blasts the shit out of it pre-flop. But that was also when Brandon was losing. All those other shitty results against me were when he was winning. And that, I guess, is when I was starting to feel a little better about things because I'd been mad at myself thinking I used bad sizes, but it wasn't even until like 2 years ago that I first had the thought, finally, that there's just a lot of variance in whatever buttons people push, whether they're just pure button clickers or not. Sometimes when you have it, they just fold, and sometimes when you're bluffing, they just call. And it didn't really matter what you did. I mean, it didn't really have that much influence on any of their rhyme or reason. They just decided this is what they're doing this time. So it was at this point I figured just timing was just not on my side when I had the nuts against him those 2 times. His state of mind was in a place where it doesn't mean he wasn't going to fuck up, but he was probably not very likely to make a mistake. Then after that, he lost another huge pot to somebody who didn't deserve it, and then he quit with like $50 left. But he said, "Good luck, guys," as he was leaving. But before that happened, I got into one other hand. A fish was on the button. He limped. Brandon limped the small blind. I checked the big blind with 8-6 of clubs. And the flop was Queen 10-3 with 2 clubs. Now I clicked a button betting 15. They both call. On the turn, I hit the flush with the 7 of clubs. And my original plan was to bet small and see if Brandon might spaz after it. But before I could do that, I saw the button reaching for some chips in the back of his stack. Now, that doesn't automatically mean he's going to bet if I check, but you would think there's at least a somewhat fair chance of it. So I check, and of course he checks. This is what I fucking get for paying attention. River was a king. Brandon checks, I bet 30, and now the button min raises to 60. I re-raise to 260, and he calls. Flush wins. But he had Jack 9 for the straight, so we know he's 100% calling the turn bet. But he may not have raised the river if I bet big on the river, and I was very likely to be doing that. So I don't know. Maybe me changing my mind and checking the turn, maybe that cost me a bunch, or maybe it made me a little more. I mean, we'll just never know if Brandon was ever going to want to get wild and crazy on that turn, because he didn't get the chance to. Should have just bet the turn, just in case, not take any chances, not, read into what the other guy was doing with his hands, picking up chips, but I don't know. I guess it did seem a little like, once again, that Brandon wasn't really in one of his crazy modes for this hand. So maybe he was just mad about the podcast he knew I was going to be doing, and maybe he didn't want to give me action. I don't know. Either way, I won a little something for the day, but it was just disappointing because I had the types of hands versus the types of players that is what you would need to have happen to have a really big day, but it still didn't happen. But all right, as I possibly anticipated, I am just going to stop here. Don't really feel like doing any more of this. So I'll get to the rest of the week's hands in the next episode, which I'll do sooner before later. Thanks for listening.